Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well, Olga. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about who you are and what you do and all the gory details?
Well, all the gory details. That'd be
All right,
wouldn't
leave out the vain gory bits, just the highlights.
it? My name's Michael. I'm the Group CEO of Assure Global Plus. We're a series of collections businesses that do everything from mum and dad, hi, you missed your payment yesterday, to helping do more serious offence collections where we're retrieving assets that people have misplaced, shall we say, or liberated.
So, like us, you're seeing people in debt, and I think the same as us. There's more debt. There's more stress. People are paying slower, and it has a flow-on effect in every space. Tax debt, the collections. What are you sort of seeing at the moment in that debt space and payment, and how people are feeling towards paying debt?
We're growing at quite the clip at the moment. So business is picking up for us, which is nice for us and probably bad for the economy in
Yeah.
terms of how that really looks. But in terms of what's happening is we're seeing more and more people who are struggling but are too scared or too intimidated or just don't know how to approach their creditors to unpack what they should do and how they should do it.
I think debt's a really funny thing. People just think of it off the top of their head as money, and whether you've got it in the bank account or you don't have it in the bank account. But there's actually a huge amount of emotions and feelings that go with the payment and with the debt. We see a lot of people with tax debt that are embarrassed, that don't know where to start, or are really scared about talking to the ATO. And I've been talking a lot about eating the frog. For those that sort of haven't caught on yet about the whole eating the frog, it's the thing you don't want to do, that thing that keeps you up at night, that every morning is on your to-do list, but you're scared or don't really know how to approach it. I'm guessing you would see a lot of that as well.
A considerable amount. I mean, the number of times where we're either talking to somebody on the phone, or if some creditors are talking to us, they're actually asking us to go in and talk to somebody because that communication is already broken down between themselves and the person that they've lent money to, for instance, or that they owe money to. And so what you've got is this disconnect between those that needs probably a little bit more compassion and a little more de-escalation than escalation because people are already sort of emotionally uptight around what's going on in their world. I mean, we don't make commitments in personally or in business that we don't think that we're going to keep.
So we're exactly the same. I often describe us a bit like a shield. So we're the shield in between the person that owes the tax debt and the ATO. And 9 times out of 10, our clients want to pay the debt back, but they don't know how to start, or they've got a scary phone call or a really scary letter that seems like this huge problem. And I'm guessing yours is the same, that people, that when they owe tax debt, they think that they have to pay it all back. And I'm assuming some of your creditors would be the same. And people think that they don't even understand that there's options for payment plans. That's where we come in and look at bite-sized payment plans, that it takes some of the emotion out because we're doing the negotiation, and it's taking that stress off the shoulders, which I assume your creditors would feel the same.
Absolutely. So what you've got is somebody who's contacting the debtor and saying, the person who owes the money and saying, hey, you owe us this money, when are you going to pay? And so it's really important for that business, the creditor, to actually get those funds so that they can do what they want to do for the rest of their business and invest back into their business and their people and what they're doing. The person who owes the money gets that call. Suddenly they're really intimidated and they're really scared that this person's going to get more aggressive. So the role that we fill is not dissimilar to what you do in many respects, and be that intermediary in between that can take that pressure and that emotional angst out of that conversation.
An example that we're helping someone at the moment is a hairdresser, based in country Victoria, and she thought she was on a payment plan. The funny thing with ATO payment plans is if you don't pay the payment plan 2 to 3 days early, it doesn't hit the ATO's account. And if you don't pay your ongoing lodgement on time, it defaults a payment plan. So she thought she was on a payment plan on her merry way and got a nasty letter from the ATO, completely freaked out, and is too scared to pick up the phone. She can go back into a payment plan. There's some interest we can knock off for her, but the thought of her having to negotiate that herself and deal with that herself has been too stressful, and she hasn't really known where to start. So that's a perfect example where we've been able to get rid of about 20,000 of the debt for her, and get her back in a payment plan. And you can just hear the relief in her voice around her thinking, I can't pay it all at once. What am I going to do? And then someone coming in and fixing the problem.
Yeah, we see a lot of that. I mean, a really good example similar to that you've just described that we've had is somebody waiting for their R&D return from the tax office. And so they hadn't paid anyone for months and months and months. And instead of talking to them about, hey, look, here's what our circumstances are, we're waiting for this lump sum to come back, they just went dead silent and didn't talk to anybody. So everyone started calling us going, hey, can you get involved? We want our money. It's important for us. And these people weren't, the debtor was not answering the phone. They were so ashamed, if you like. They get caught in this spiral, that they just didn't want to talk to anyone. So if I hide under a rock, surely once the money comes in, it'll all be okay again, right? It just doesn't happen that way. You've got to keep that communication link going, otherwise it doesn't happen. And if you don't, like the ATO does, everyone starts getting a little more aggressive. If you're not communicating and you're not telling us what's going on, then you're just avoiding your obligations, so we're going to put a little more pressure on.
I think that aggressive and escalation point is really interesting as well, because a lot of people feel once it gets to that point, it's at a point of no return. But with ATO debt, even with a directed penalty notice, even with credit reporting, garnishee notice, we can still jump in, even a statutory demand, we can still jump in and there's solutions, but often making that first phone call, that first bite of the frog, to try to get the help and go, okay, well, can someone else do it? Because it just seems too hard. And that's actually a reason why we do a lot of these videos, is so that people know that there are different solutions out there. And it's not necessarily, I'm assuming, same with your services, when you talk about debt collectors, people think, oh gosh, it's going to be someone scary, banging on doors, causing a huge fuss. But if you get the right experts to do things in the right way, the results can be quite amazing.
Yeah, so there is so much about collections. So everyone thinks of debt collections as this sort of red-bearded stepchild of the collections industry, when there's so much more behavioural psychology behind it and actually understanding what the processes are there. So when we're starting to talk about our type of debt collections, and normally the horse is bolted by the time we get in there when people are talking to us, we're actually trying to figure out what's actually going on. And the funny part is when we actually start doing audits of people's debt ledgers to try and figure out, or an individual transaction, what we're going to see is that they may have actually issued their invoices incorrectly in the first place, that the debtor has actually asked them to correct it, but they haven't done anything about it. I mean, so if you look at that sort of from a statistical basis, and we've been going for around 50 years, statistically, 80% of all unpaid invoices are the fault of the person who issued them. So they haven't got all of the compliance details right in there, they've got the amounts wrong, there's a commercial dispute that hasn't been resolved, so everyone's gone, right, I'm throwing my toys out of the cot until such time as I have those conversations. What are those pieces that compel people not to pay? And amongst those 80% issues are things like client concentration risk. I do 70% of the work in our business with one person, and something's gone wrong with their business, and it jeopardizes everything that I'm doing for my business, my family, my kids, everything going on that front.
And so we see a lot of that with debtors as well, with clients that have got huge debt to the ATO, and they've had one person that they were relying on paying everything to them. It's all fallen apart, especially in building construction at the moment, and the flow-on effect from that. The other thing we see a lot of, which I'm guessing you would too, is people think that insolvency is the only way or an easy way. And one of the big things that I'm about is that there are other options, there are other solutions, and whether it is using a client might have a whole heap of unpaid invoices, and using a specialist to collect them in a particular way, or having an ATO debt that they've tried to call the ATO so no deal, we're not giving you the payment plan that you want, but then we're able to get them into an affordable plan that they didn't even think possible. Do you hear that thrown around a lot? It's all too hard, all too late, we'll just have to go bankrupt.
Well, there is a lot of that going on, and I think that comes back to that emotional stress component. And if you start looking at the psychology of it, there's a thing called the Kubler-Ross change curve. And most people are familiar with the simplified version of that, about the 5 stages of grief, right? So I was mentioning earlier, we don't make commitments we don't expect to deliver on, right? That we've made that commitment. We know what the rules are, we're going to follow them, and everything's going to be okay. When things go awry and we're confronted with that, and we go through that whole denial, anger, and then depression, effectively, and then we try and barter our way out of those situations. And so the things that you're describing there, you can almost track them across that curve to see what they look like. And then at the end, you've got that acceptance piece. So not dissimilarly to what Tax Assure are doing, us at AGP are really going, hey, let's get you from this, I've got a problem, and denying it, through to acceptance as fast as possible, because there can't be any solutions on the table until you own what's happened to you. I mean, your circumstances may or may not be your fault. That's irrelevant to what is the problem we're trying to help you resolve, and how do we go about finding the solutions that are available to you.
Absolutely. So sometimes I'll be talking about what I do, and people say that must be such a boring job. All you do is deal with numbers all day. You're just calculating tax returns. And I say, I actually don't do any tax returns, and I don't deal with a lot of numbers. We deal with people. And so exactly what you've described, it's the human side of what we do all day, every day, about how they got in this position, what's been going on, what's changed, and how we can help them to get out of it, and help them sleep at night and get back on with running their business. Because sometimes, well, most of the time, I actually find these debts are manageable with the right help and with the right partners that are then brought in. Whereas when you're sitting on your own, it's funny, we actually have a inquiry email on our website, and I often look at the time those emails come in, and it's invariably in the middle of the night. So when people are on their own at night, stressed, and it does, these problems feel like too much when you are on your own.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about small trade businesses, I mean, you were talking about those and how commonly you're seeing those. I mean, we see lots and lots of trade businesses that are in trouble, not because they've done something specifically wrong, but they don't understand how they could have done something better. There's just those pieces there. How do you set up your controls so that you don't get yourself into that position? How do you make sure that you're not exposed on a particular item that then drags the rest of your business into chaos when you're working from 4 in the morning till 11 at night, trying to balance everything that you need to do as a small business? How the hell have you got time to worry about your debtors, the tax office, all that stuff? I've just got to keep going because it'll work out in the end. We've got to stop getting caught in those cycles and try and figure out, what do I need to do? Stop, breathe, accept, and then change my circumstances and come up with a better strategy so that doesn't happen again.
So what do you think your top tips for businesses would be? If they've got outstanding debtors and the stress, what do you think, maybe 3 top tips of what people should do at the moment, and to both prevent it, but also if they've got that debt at the moment?
1, don't assume that your debtor's got the money. It's okay, they'll pay. That's a terribly bad set of circumstances to be. And the reason being that for every 7 days a client's debt remains outstanding to you, your ability to convert that by yourself to actually get that money in without external help falls by 50%. It's actually exactly the same as So it's actually the same as the sales thing. If you've got a quote with a client, every 7 days that quote isn't converted, your ability to convert it falls by 50%. The same thing happens in collections. So I mapped a bunch of data around that to see what it would look like, thinking it might be different, and it's absolutely identical. So the first tip is, don't assume that the client's got the money, and the earlier that you get involved in saying, hey, what's going on? Have you got issues? The more likely you are to get honesty out of that client. The more you're thinking about yourself when you're making that call, the less likely you're open to hearing or getting a hint from them about the fact that they're struggling.
And for me, it's not ignoring it, eating that frog as hard as it might be, and finding experts. Finding people. I think that this world that we work and live in is very difficult now. It's so much more complicated than it ever used to be. So finding the right person to help with the right problem, and getting that shield. If it's too hard for you to face, having someone in place to help you move forward and eat the frog and do the thing that you didn't want to do, and how much better you'll then feel as soon as that's off your shoulders and you've got someone else in place.
And my second top tip here would be make sure you've got a fairly robust set of terms and conditions. So you might never need to action on them, but without the right set of terms and conditions, actually collecting from somebody who's unwilling to pay rather than willing to pay, and there's a big difference between that. I mean, I might want to pay, but I can't, is a very different conversation to I could pay, but I don't want to. So having the right set of terms and conditions for your type of business is really important. You might end up spending a couple of grand with your lawyer to get those developed, but that puts you in such a stronger position with your clients should the worst come about. So in the event of worst case scenario, you're in a much stronger position if you've got a set of terms and conditions. So if, heaven forbid, you end up in court and looking for a decision, a judge can compare the two contracts and decide what's fair and what's not fair.
Yep. And it's the same, we would say, when doing an application to get rid of the interest and penalties, a phone call is not enough. It all comes down to these things called legal practice requirements, which again is the law. So not that I'm practicing as a lawyer anymore, but that legal blood will always run through my veins. That is helpful, and that's often what it comes back to.
Well, I'm increasingly practicing as a redhead, as you can see by the amount of grey coming into my beard these days. So that doesn't necessarily quite work as well for me. But certainly the old high school teacher in me comes out a great deal when we're talking to people. Let's actually figure out what's going on and how that's going on. And my third tip is find your specialists early, right? Talk to your accountant, talk to those people, ask people, hey, what have you observed about my business? I want to talk to you about what's happening in my business. Go and have those conversations with people, because most of them are obligation free. And then that way you can get a whole heap of different perspectives around how you can approach people if there's a situation going on in your business, or they'll be thinking about who they can refer you to so they can talk to a tax assurer or an AGP to help them out.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.